So good morning, everybody, and welcome to this presentation about our project Talking the Coast, which we ran with the charity Plover Rovers last year. I'm going to, first of all, present the project, what it was all about, what we set out to do, and then what we actually did. I'm going to talk a little bit about what our project budget was, how we worked around the fact that we didn't have any big funding, and we're going to hear a little bit from some people who were involved in the project as well. So let me just start my presentation. Here we are. Oops, that is where it's supposed to be. That's where it's supposed to be. So the Plover Rovers Talking the Coast project was an idea that actually started out just before COVID. I had the idea, I think, in January, and then when COVID hit, I decided I had a lot of time on my hands because I was furloughed from my job, and I decided, well, a community outreach project is maybe at the minute not going to happen because of all the restrictions, but it's definitely great to have the time to plan it. So basically in 2020, we just set up the charity, planned the project, recruited volunteers, and then with a view of actually doing it in 2021. So that's the timeline that this project had. Basically 2 years, 2020 building it up, and 2021 then actually executing it. What we were trying to do with this project, Talking the Coast, our aims were basically to build bridges between science and society. I should probably say who I am. I'm Scott. I'm the founder and director of the Plover Rovers, and I am a marine and environmental scientist. I have a master in marine environmental protection. Before that, I studied environmental and sustainability sciences, and I'm also an artist and a musician. I basically just felt like, because I had worked sort of out of academia when I was doing my music stuff and everything, and then sort of coming back into academia, doing my master's, I felt that there's quite a divide between science and certain parts of society. Even though there's a lot of outreach projects, you kind of have the feeling that it's always the same segments, really, of people who are reached by these outreach projects very often, and we wanted to kind of bring science more into society in order to create knowledge, increase ocean literacy, network with other charities for sustained engagement in the areas where we were reaching out to people, and through that empower coastal communities to face the sea rather than to turn their backs on the sea. And we wanted to do this by celebrating local heritage. I mean, we're in the UK, it's an island. Obviously, there's lots of people who have a local heritage that relates to the sea. So we wanted to tap into that. We wanted to highlight specific local issues and then put them, with the help of science, into a larger context. So increasing that ocean literacy, and also raise the profile of the English coast. That's, of course, something where COVID really helped us with the staycations and everyone not being able to travel away. A lot of people ventured out to actually get to know what is around them. So the basic idea that we had was that we would partner up with all sorts of institutions and other charities like the Wildlife Trust or Surfers Against Sewage, or even smaller local charities that were doing something along the coast, and then also universities, places of science, places where you could get the scientists from, that we would then facilitate events all along the coast where we would bring these people from the science community physically into coastal communities, have events there. We had different types of events, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And through that, increase ocean literacy in these communities, and then have people sort of activate people in these communities to maybe then feed back, for example, into local charities, so that in a way we would also kind of recruit new volunteers, hopefully, for a couple of these local charities we got involved with. This is just an example here where we, just to illustrate this, we partnered with the University of Hull to get the scientists. Then we had our local engagement officers who facilitated an event, which in that case was a guided walk through the urban cityscape of Hull, urban coastal scape, by one of the scientists from the university. And then we had a small group. All our events were, because of COVID restrictions, were always small group events, which turned out to be a really great thing. And I'll say more about that later. And she did this walk, and that way sort of opened up the urban wildlife of Hull to these people and gave them a new perspective on it. So just because this is a presentation for the UN Decade of Ocean Science, we fit in with a lot of the things that this decade sets out to do. The education and the empowerment of local communities, facilitate mutual learning across research and stakeholder communities. So this sort of cross-community communication is something that was really important to us, inclusive and participative. Then access to science, reinforce the dialogue between science and society, while also giving value to the traditional knowledge. That is something that we integrated into our approach, with sort of the local heritage storytelling aspect, which I'll come to in a second, communication with local communities, and just developing ways to communicate ocean science by simplifying the language and by being just comprehensible to a larger segment of society. So this was all things that we set out to do with this project. We developed a 4-level approach to ocean literacy, which basically has these 4 pillars of science communication. That's where it all started, to present relevant science with a focus on an active dialogue between the scientists and the members of the communities. And these small groups that we had because of COVID really helped with this dialogue, because we didn't have sort of the situation that you have a big lecture type thing in front of 50 people, because our events were very often restricted to there maybe being 10 participants rather than 50 or 100. And that was, of course, great, because that meant that we could have conversations between the presenters and the participants, as if it was just an informal sort of walk and talk along the coast, which was really the idea of the Talking the Coast project. So this informal communication, I think, really helped with this active dialogue approach. Then art and emotion is another pillar of this approach, where we believe that art can really help science communication by providing a more active and immersive sort of experience for the people. So we collaborated with a whole bunch of artists in several of our events, and we found that was really something that sparked the interest of people in a different way. And also the events that included art aspects were generally the ones that appealed to a broader segment of society. So that was very interesting. And this emotional connectivity, we have one of our collaborating artists here today who will talk about that a little bit in a second. Then the next pillar is activism. So we thought we don't just want to present knowledge to people. We want to give them the possibility to also be active locally as a result of that knowledge input. And this was the idea of really collaborating with local charities who could then basically say provide like a direct pathway from a scientific presentation to saying, okay, and locally we've got this charity that meets once a week and cleans up the beach and does like a litter survey or whatever. So that was the idea of not leaving people in limbo after giving them all this information, but of actually giving them the opportunity to then be active and do something positive. And storytelling, and that's what I was talking about valuing this idea of valuing local knowledge. Where we actually want to find out where people are at in these communities, what their history is with the sea, what their relationship to the sea is, what are their visions for the future, what are their concerns and fears. Do they center more around sort of negative things like do they feel threatened by the sea because of erosion or floodings? Do they feel a love for the sea stewardship because they're a small scale, they have a history of small scale fishing, for example, where there's a lot of a lot of traditional knowledge about the ecosystem. So that was something that we were really interested in, and again, the small groups kind of facilitated that people would also talk to us about their relationship to the sea rather than us just like sort of presenting them science about the sea. So yeah, and the just talking about the cultural heritage there, obviously on an island nation, it's a big deal. There's lots of coastal heritage here. And a lot of the time in you see a lot of pubs, for example, where you have these old black and white pictures of very picturesque looking fishermen. But then with modern developments, maybe that community is actually no longer a fishing community, but now it's a tourist, more like based around coastal tourism. Or you have communities where there used to be a lot of maritime industry, shipbuilding, and maybe that has moved to a different country, or there's not as much going on anymore. So the idea was also through the storytelling and looking back at the heritage of the community to find out what kind of a connection to the marine world there was, and how people could maybe also reconnect to that connection to the sea. In some cases, maybe that could be enhancing or reviving a positive stewardship kind of attitude, like in the case of small fishing communities, for example, who used to work with the sea in a way that was not destructive. And there was a lot of history back in the 19th century, for example, when they first introduced big scale bottom trawling, where a lot of small scale fishing communities were very active against these trawlers because they knew it was going to destroy the ecosystems. So sort of a history of fighting for their local ecosystems. Or it could also be about turning negatives into positives, in the case, for example, of a place like Hull, which was a center for whaling. So obviously, if your great-great-grandfather was a whaler, that's not maybe something that nowadays you would find particularly positive, or find like that's a particularly positive connection with the sea. But it's kind of like also finding this connection. Maybe this great-great-grandfather was not generally an evil person. He just lived in different times. That was his job, but he might still have had a really emotional connection to the sea. Maybe there's some diaries where he writes about how beautiful it is or whatever. And so taking that, what used to be maybe a negative and more destructive connection to the sea, and turning that though into sort of a positive storytelling of what you can do nowadays to kind of maybe also make up for some of the stuff that your great-great-grandfather did, and get involved in a positive way with the sea. So that's the idea around this whole heritage and storytelling approach. And then feeding into that, of course, the sort of highlighting the natural heritage of the area, and introducing them to the nature around them. And as I said, COVID was very helpful for that, because people tendentially then couldn't, since they couldn't go away, they just opened up their eyes more to their local surroundings, which in some cases also had, of course, a negative effect, with increased footfall. And we had one event at a salt marsh that is now eroding at quite an amazing rate because of the amount of people who went there, and on the new paths they trampled into this marsh. And so it wasn't all positive, but it definitely kind of heightened people's appreciation for their local surroundings, because of course you will only be motivated to protect something that you care about and that you love. So in order to love something, you need to know it. So that was that idea of reintroducing people to what's in front of their doorstep. And then from a science communication point of view, we wanted to raise awareness for some of the mechanistic reasons behind the things that people experience on the coast, like, for example, erosion, plastic pollution, flooding, things that people would experience, but maybe not all of them would know the bigger picture behind these things that are happening to them. And that was this idea of that through giving them this knowledge, we would empower them to be just to be more able to proactively take local action, to maybe get active also in local lobbying groups, and maybe also sort of lead to a certain to more self-esteem when it comes to sort of on the political level, having opinions about these things. So that was the thing of like sort of giving them this scientific input to describe what's going on locally around them. And then empower them through positive messaging, which was really, really important to us. So we didn't want to come in there with sort of doom and gloom messaging, but we wanted to give them this positive messaging and this direct pathways to getting active in local initiatives. So to give them the sense that they can be part of the solution, that it's not just being part of the problem just simply because of the fact that we're humans and humans are the ones who are causing all these problems, but that they can be part of a solution and of actively changing their local environment to the better. And at the same time, we also wanted to raise awareness because we wanted to take people out on the coast. This whole idea of talking the coast was that we take groups of people to the coast. So obviously we also had to deal with questions around recreational disturbance and promote really mindful access to our coasts. So we had a code of conduct for all of our walkers. We had a page on our website about best practices, and we again and again talked about recreational disturbance problems. Our mascot, the ringed plover, is a ground breeding bird, which we picked him partly because of that, because ground breeding birds really suffer a lot from recreational disturbance, and all around the English coast, especially now with COVID times. That was just a big issue for a lot of the wildlife. So that's what we were all about. And now I come to how the charity was, how we structured the charity. Our volunteers were mostly students and early career professionals, not only, but mostly. Most of them came from a somewhat marine background, but we also had people from other fields like art or journalism or psychology, education, who just were passionate about the coastal environments and wanted to get involved. It was very easy to recruit volunteers during COVID because everyone had a lot of time, and the work was remote. You could do it from home. So in the beginning, we straight away, within 2 months, I think we recruited something like 75 people, which was amazing and which was good, because as COVID kind of tapered off and people had jobs again, a lot of the volunteers also tapered off and disappeared. So it was good that we had a large pool so that in the end we could pull the project through. And I'm going to hand over now for a couple of minutes to one of our volunteers who was a local engagement officer, so involved in organizing local events, Helen. If you just want to talk a little bit about your experience volunteering for the Plover Rovers and what it was that you did.
Okay, yes. Hello, everybody. So my name is Helen Innes, and as Scott says, I was a local engagement officer on the Talking the Coast project. So my background is in education and event delivery in arts and culture. So I'm one of those volunteers who came from outside of the marine conservation sector. I've been volunteering and working in marine conservation and ocean literacy education now since 2020. But my first experience of that really was when my volunteering with Plover Rovers on the Talking the Coast project began. So I found out about the project on the Conservation Careers website, I think, when I was looking for volunteering opportunities. I had planned to use the summer of 2020 for getting experience in marine conservation, hopefully going out on expeditions. And obviously when the pandemic hit, it became clear that kind of activity was not going to happen. So as Scott says, an online opportunity to volunteer was a fantastic thing. And I was really attracted to the idea of the blend of science and culture that was making up the Plover Rovers approach. It was obvious from the website the ways that the project were going to work in that way that seemed really appealing. So firstly, I had an interview with Scott, and then joined a briefing meeting on Zoom to discuss how the Talking the Coast project was going to run. So it felt like quite an ambitious and exciting project to be involved in, to have events taking place all over the country, especially in the context of that pandemic. And lots of organisations were cutting back activity and delaying with the changing restrictions around outdoor events. There was a lot of uncertainty. But being an LEO was great, because as you can see, there's a huge, big group of us, and we could all rely on each other for support and advice. The way things were set up really allowed for that network to be very supportive. So there were 2 wellbeing officers whose role was to offer support and help to the rest of the LEOs, which was fantastic. We had regular meetings online to get up to date with what the team as a whole was doing. And having this huge cohort of volunteers immediately created a network of contacts, which was fantastic. Especially if you're moving careers into a new industry like myself, and you don't have a cohort, say, of fellow students from a course that you're graduating from or something like that. It was really nice to immediately be able to meet all these people who were also trying to work in the same area as me. I felt like it was a really well-pitched volunteering opportunity where you were able to feel important and do useful work and be working on the project. But there was so much support for doing what you wanted to do. So there wasn't, too much responsibility. It was just pitched just right, where you could be ambitious about what you wanted to deliver, but nothing ever felt like it was going to be too much. There was always support for delivering what you wanted to do. And I found it really uplifting that despite the kind of context of the pandemic, we were able to forge so many connections and get lots of events off the ground. So for me, I was LEO of a stretch of coast on the southeast of the UK, Sittingbourne to Ramsgate. So when I was researching the potential partners in that area and contacting them, it was fantastic to be able to get stuck into finding out all about, as Scott says, what was going on the ground, what were the current issues with conservation, and what people were already doing, what activities were already happening. It was brilliant to have that series of conversations and meetings with people about what their work was and how Plover Rovers could slot into that and support. Events were allowed to kind of evolve quite organically. So we ended up having some events that didn't fit the profile of a walker-talker on the beach, sometimes because of the pandemic and sometimes because of other organizations and their particular agendas and ways of working. But what was really nice was the project was really flexible to allow things to evolve in whatever direction. So we ended up having an online webinar event about migratory birds in conjunction with Birdwise East Kent, which was fantastic, with an artist and a scientist both presenting about migratory birds to encourage the community to protect them. We had a full day of family activities that did take place on the coast, which was fantastic. And we also co-produced a contemporary art and science crossover project with Crate Studios. So we ended up with these quite different outcomes, but a range of really exciting and interesting projects to be involved in. So in conclusion, it's been a fantastic project to be involved with, and I've really enjoyed being able to work in those 3 very different ways across those different partners.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm of course very happy to hear from happy volunteers. Yeah, so that was, as Helen said, we really ended up putting out a lot of different events because we wanted the project to be kind of organic. And even though it was, the main idea was talking the coast, so getting scientists into coastal communities and giving presentations or like talking to people, we were very open to doing all sorts of other things as well, which proved very, very helpful during a pandemic, because you just needed to be on your toes and kind of react to whatever you could do. So coming to the Walker Talkers, these were members of the scientific community who would present their relevant research. Here was one of the events where the weather was not quite playing along very nicely. That was a scientist who is researching Sabellaria reef worms, and she was talking about some Sabellaria reefs on this very beach to the local, to some locals, and none of them had been aware that there were Sabellaria in this location, and so that was a really nice example for someone presenting their current research to a group of locals who were very, very interested in knowing that this animal actually exists where they live, and who before that had no idea. So that was really really great. That was one of the things we wanted to achieve, that people would have an enhanced knowledge of their local ecosystems as well. If the people who did the presentations were more sort of at the beginning stages of their careers, that was a very great outreach experience for them. We also had some veterans who didn't really need any more outreach experience, but we had a bunch of younger scientists as well, for whom that was a great step, of going out there presenting what they're doing. And as I said earlier, provide access to the bigger picture and tie in local issues of global processes. And then, because the groups were fairly small, as you can see here, you could then engage in informal conversations and also learn from the local people. And that can also feed back into the research, of course. If then some local people can tell you about some observations they might be making. See here, there's a relatively old fellow there in the group who's probably lived there all his life, potentially, and could maybe feed in some interesting information about the area that the scientists wouldn't have been aware of. So that was a great way of entering into conversation. Then we had a very wonderful small group of people, our long distance walker bloggers, and one of them is here today as well, and will share her experiences with you in a minute. So these were also members of the scientific community. They were all students. And they kind of acted as the connecting thread, so that because we wanted to cover as much of the English coast as possible. And since there's a coast path spanning almost the entire English coast, we kind of thought like it'd be neat if we'd have scientists actually walk this entire path and talk to people as they move along, and write about their natural and cultural observations while they're doing it. So write a blog while they're walking, interact with local people, and just raise awareness for the project and for the English coast. And also we were mapping their progress. We had an interactive map, which I will show you a bit later on, to also make this experience accessible for people who maybe physically couldn't go out to the coast. So Katie is here today, who did quite a long stretch of walking. And Katie, if you want to share some of your experiences during that walk.
Sorry, I'm in the middle of Rural France. I'm trying to get some good Wi-Fi. Yeah, so my name's Katie. I was one of the long distance walker bloggers, or LDBWs, as we were called. And yes, there's 5 of us, and together we covered pretty well the entire English coastline. I walked over 300 miles, and it sort of varied. Everyone sort of did roughly that distance. And yeah, it was an absolute honor being able to walk. Well, I mean, obviously in the southwest, there's the Southwest Coast Path, which is really well known, but being able to walk kind of not undiscovered, but unknown parts of the coast. So I walked Essex, Suffolk, and Norfolk coastlines, and the Essex coastline certainly was the most surprising, because everyone seems to think that Essex is quite an urban county because of its proximity to London, but actually its coastline is absolutely beautiful, and you'd be miles away. The most remote part that I'd ever been in that walk. And yeah, just the opportunity to tell people about the unknown parts of our coastline, perhaps remove some prejudices, open up new opportunities for people, was insane. And that was, all through the blogs that Scott was talking about. I think another really rewarding part for me was giving talks en route, which is part of this, and at loads of local schools, and just inspiring the kids about what they actually had just on their doorstep, because the most deprived places in the UK are on the coast. Well, a lot of them are anyway. I walked through Jaywick and other parts of Essex and Norfolk, which are really, these kids, even if they live just 2 miles inland, they won't get to the coast. So just actually telling them about the amazing nature they have and the amazing geography, yeah, and just getting them inspired about getting outside.
Katie, unfortunately, your Wi-Fi connection is really spotty.
Getting excited about our operations was, yeah, really. Yeah. Right.
Trying to
Tell me if this
yeah, it's still quite spotty.
works any better.
Not really. Okay, but I think everyone was able to hear at least most of what Katie said. I think I'm gonna cut her short here, but definitely go ahead later. I'm gonna show you our interactive map. Her entire blog is on there. She's also published it herself. I think I'm happy to share these links with anyone who's interested. You can also go to our website and you will find these blogs. And yeah, it's just it was a great opportunity to really get in touch with, like she was saying, communities that normally don't see a lot of this kind of engagement because they are very deprived and they're not the sort of normal target for scientific outreach. So these were our long distance walker bloggers. So they produce these blogs that are still out there and can still be read. And then we come to the artists. So I said we were collaborating with a bunch of artists who are in some way inspired by nature, the coast and the sea, to participate in events, paired up with scientists, explore how art can open new avenues of knowing, both for the attendees and the involved scientists. So this is sort of an aspect of art-based research that I'm personally very interested in. And explore the power of storytelling. We had 2 dedicated stories written just for the Plover Rovers. The author of one of them is here with us today. And the power of music as well. I said I'm a musician myself, so that's something that's very dear to my heart. I play in a hard rock band and we do a lot of music that revolves around nature. And so that was something that I could also tap into with my other passion, which was nice. So I'm going to just hand over for a couple of minutes to Sabu, who was one of our collaborating artists, to tell us a little bit from an artist's point of view, what his inspiration was for joining this project.
Hi, I'm Sabu. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, so I mainly write things like texts and music, and I try to make art which revolves around not only nature, but also our place in it, our place as humans. So I'm fighting against the idea that there's a division between humans and nature, and try to make people feel that they are indeed a part of nature, which we are. And on a more surface level, I try to produce art that makes people aware of their natural surroundings and care for their natural surroundings. Because as Scott pointed out some minutes ago, people will want to protect what they love. So if people love their natural surroundings, they will want to protect them. And in music, if I focus on music now, we can work with a combination of inspiring lyrics and uplifting harmonies and melodies. So if we combine lyrics that talk about the connection between us and nature with melodies that reach the heart, we can move something in people. Because music and other forms of art are great ways of triggering feelings. In our case, we want to trigger positive feelings towards nature and our space in nature. And I mentioned uplifting melodies. So I think with art, we can drive messages home on a completely different level than, for example, if we just give people informative texts. Like information we get in written form often gets stuck on a brain level. I mean, obviously people are different from one another. There are also people who react very emotionally to something they read, me, for example. But with many people, that's not the case. Many people need a more immersive experience in order to really feel involved with the information they receive. So a form of art like music is a great way to make people feel involved. A great thing about a song, for example, is also that you can sing it. So people don't have to remain passive recipients, but can become active by vocalizing the lyrics and going into the melodies. And if you have lyrics which are written in first person, people are all of a sudden saying or singing I. You know, if you have a song that says I reached the sea, and you sing it to an uplifting, positive, energizing melody, you start feeling it. It becomes something that you say about yourself. Which is why, among other things, I also composed a choir piece for Plover Rovers. So this is one thing I think can be a strong tool when you want more people to connect to a topic. Make them feel it by using way more senses than a text. Like for example, an informative text could. An informative text is good, but it's just a piece of paper that feels dry in your hands. It's way more intense if you feel your body vibrate with sound and hear harmonies that make you feel good and that energize you. And you also have lyrics that stick in your head. We also memorize information better if we're not just presented with it, but if it comes connected to many different stimuli, like a rhyme and rhythm and melody, we can sway to a rhythm and feel it. So in any case, it's important to get people active. They should not stay passive recipients. For example, I also wrote an interactive piece of literature, a story in which the reader keeps coming to crossroad points in the story and always has to make decisions how to continue. So there, the idea is also that you get active, that you don't just take information and then slowly forget it again as time passes, but that you process information on a deeper emotional level, deal with it actively, and let it feed into the decisions you make. So to wrap this up, I believe that if we want to make people protect what surrounds them, we have to trigger feelings of care and love for these surroundings. And we have to find ways how to really involve people emotionally, so they feel they are not just bystanders, but actually participants. Because obviously only activated people will be what we call agents for change, and art can be a powerful tool.
Thank you very much. Yes, true words. Wonderful. So that was all of the elements of the project, and as you can see, it was very ambitious and it was a large project. And maybe it's surprising that the project budget overall over these 2 years that we had at our disposal was £2,740. That does not seem like a lot of money for such a big project, and it isn't. It was an amount that we raised with 2 fundraisers. So we had no funding, no government funding, no funding whatsoever, mostly because most of the funds were kind of redirected at COVID-related projects. It was very hard to get funding for anything else. And what we really enjoyed about the fact of having no funding was that we could be very explorative. We could try out a lot of things because we didn't have to report to someone who gave us money. We could really just do what we thought was a good idea, and we only had to report back to ourselves. So that gave us a lot of creative freedom. So the absence of money actually freed up a lot of creative energy, and that's something I would like to pass on to other people. It's not always a problem not to have money. You need to work around with. Obviously, there's some things you can't do, but on the other hand, it can really free up creativity because you don't have this framework of reporting that comes attached to grants. So yeah, this was our project budget. This was the approximate number of people that we reached with our 19 online events, which we put on between November 2020 and May 2021, when then our live events actually kicked off. So we had a lot of webinars. We put them up on YouTube, on a YouTube channel afterwards. I think by now it's more views, but this is this is an end of project figure. So this would have been November 2021. When I looked at all the stats for the project when we officially ended it. This is the approximate number of people that we reached with our live events that we held between June 21 and October 21. Again, it's not a huge number, but the good thing was that we had these small groups. So that really gave us a lot of high quality interaction. And it made us kind of think about, in terms of project evaluation, it made us think about what are really good indicators for the success of such a project, because very often you're just kind of looking at these quantitative indicators like numbers of participants that you managed to reach, but we were more interested really in qualitative indicators of sort of how people interacted more than how many people interacted. And again, the COVID situation was very helpful there, because one of the feedbacks that we got from our presenters was a lot of it centered around the fact that the groups had been small and how great the communication had been with the people in the group. This was the approximate number of blog reads through our website. We had a very active blog with over 2,000 reads at that point, and about 2,000 visits to our interactive map. So that was good numbers for us. We were quite flashed how many people we managed to read. Like I said, this is I was going to present our interactive map. This is a map we just built with Google Maps. It shows all the coastal walking routes. It shows the blocks written by our long distance walkers. That's the walker icons. If you click on the walker icons, you can follow them along on their walks along the coast. We had all our events on there, which are the yellow stars. And then we also had information about most coastal towns in England, which is not shown here on the screenshot because the map is not recognizable anymore if we show everything. So the idea with this interactive map was really to make the coast accessible for people who cannot physically visit it, and to just be able to experience our interaction with the coast without actually being there. So this was a great way of scaling up the project and taking it from a very local level to a much more global level. And again, these maps are free to build. There's no money involved in that. It's just a little bit of work, but it's quite easy. You don't need an expert to do it. So again, it's very scalable, very accessible way of doing it, which to us was also very important because we kind of want this project to be a blueprint for projects everywhere, and maybe also really in places where there are no funds easily available for something like that. So if you go to our website, there's a link in the last slide. You can go and check out our interactive map and get stuck into these blogs, which I would really recommend. We had 24 live events from Whitby to Wembury, so all across the English coast. And all of these events were completely volunteer run, and the people who participated did it voluntarily. And we were very, very thankful for so much enthusiasm and so much willingness to give up your time. The one thing that I did not like about not having more money was that we could not pay the artists. And I think that would be something that I would look to do in the future, would be really to pay the participating artists, because you're always expected to do stuff for free when you're an artist because you're passionate about it. But it's really something that's very valuable and that should be also remunerated if possible. But it was great to have all these people really donating their time and effort for our project. Then because the groups were so small, we got a lot of very good qualitative feedback from our walker talkers. So we did a survey with all of our walker talkers after the event, which had a very good response rate as well, which was great. So the first success when people actually respond to your survey. I think the response rate was almost 80%, so that was nice. A huge number of feedback that their event went very well or well, so that was great. We had a great rapport between the walker talkers and the attendees, and that was due to the small groups. We had a high level of engagement. Again, you can monitor this very well if you have a small group, because you really see everyone. You can kind of gauge how involved they are or how not involved they are. So that was great. We had a good sort of result as far as extending people's knowledge. Attendees seemed more knowledgeable or confident about the topic by the end. Again, through the conversations we were having, you could kind of get an idea of this. So that was a really good result as well, qualitative again. Of course, hard to actually measure this, but this is just the impression that the presenters had afterwards. Quite a good expression of interest to learn more about the topic in the future. Which is great, which was one of our goals, obviously. And I think the biggest challenge that remained was really what we all struggle with as educators, I think. Was there a mixture of people from different walks of life? If you're offering sort of science communication events, very often there's a certain segment of people you reach, and these are the people who will go to all the RSPB bird watching experiences. They will already be involved probably with the Wildlife Trust. They will already be interested. And of course, it's great to give them even more information. But what we are looking for is reach out to the people who are maybe not interested yet, or who normally are not that typical segment. And we see here that people did not really feel like there was, they strongly agreed with this statement that there was a mixture of people from different walks of life. I myself did a couple of presentations as well, and I would also say I would probably vote somewhere like a 2 or 3 there, because it was very sort of white academic middle class in most of the events. So what we need to work on is clearly to reach different segments. The walker, the bloggers did that because they literally just walked through all these very random places that were just at the coast and talked to people there. And what we found was that the events that included an art aspect were the ones that really were gripped a larger a bigger segment of society. Interactive art, and I think also the dog training was a very good thing there, because dog walkers, everyone has dogs. That's not a class thing, and there I think through the dog walking thing, we had a dog trainer in one of the events, which I think is a really good way into people as well. So yeah, get them with interactiveness and art and things like that. Yeah, so that was all from me. We have a couple of minutes for questions if there are any. Otherwise, this presentation will be uploaded as well through the UN Ocean Decade Laboratory website, and also on our YouTube channel. And you can visit our website. There's a lot of content there about what we did and what we're going to do in the future. And yeah, just thanks to everyone for being here this morning. And I shall stop the recording now. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I'm a friend.